Chapter 23. Significant Books. One day I asked Anastasia's grandfather if he had ever had the opportunity to read any spiritual or scholarly books. His answer struck me as rather strange. "If you mean taking a book into my hands, leafing through the pages and reading the words printed in the books, that's something I've done only on one occasion. But everything written in significant books is known to me." "How so? And what are significant books? If there are significant books, that means there must also be insignificant ones, eh?" "Indeed. But why are you stuffing your head full of all this?" "What do you mean why? A cultured and civilized man ought to be well read. When I speak at readers' conferences, I'm often asked whether I've read this book or the other. But I've only read just a few books in my lifetime, so I'd like to know which books I should read first." "A lifetime isn't enough to read all of them, even if one read all day from morning till night. That's why I need to know about these significant books, so as not to come across as an utter ignoramus. You know, Vladimir, when you're asked at your readers' conferences what books you've read, you can say you're familiar with all of them." "I can't do that unless I have actually read them all. They might ask me, for instance, what a particular author said in his book. If I've never even held his book in my hands, there's no way I could come up with any kind of answer. Simply tell them this author has nothing substantial to say. Tell the one who asked you the question to prove otherwise. You know, Vladimir, it only appears from the numbers that there's a lot of books out there. In fact, you can count the number of significant books on your fingers." "But how do I know whether a book is significant or not?" "With the help of a criterion." "Can you let me have this criterion, at least to borrow?" "Of course I can let you have it, and all your readers too. The point is that the criterion for determining the significance of a book is people's way of life." "What do you mean, their way of life? What's that got to do with it?" "People live in various parts of the globe. Human societies are conditioned by national differences. National cultures vary from country to country, as does their way of life and their longevity. The culture of various peoples is shaped under the influence of, among other things, a significant book. Generally, a book that determines a people's philosophy, gives rise to a particular religion, and consequently a way of life. In China, for example, Confucius's teachings are considered significant. A special view of the world has been developing there since ancient times. To put it briefly, it views the world as a living organism. Part of this cosmic organism or system is the concept of yin and yang. If you are interested in the Chinese people's way of life, if you think it might serve as an example for the rest of mankind, then read Confucius's book. If you are interested in the Japanese worldview and their life achievements, then read a book about the country's traditional religion, Shintoism. In many respects, it helped shape the Japanese people's way of life. If you think that the happiest people live in the Christian world, then read the Bible. Significant books are those books which shape a particular way of life in a part of human society. But in Christian spiritual literature, after all, there is a lot more besides just the Bible. Yes, indeed. But there is absolutely nothing new in them. As a rule, in every significant book, there are one or two basic thoughts or philosophical conclusions. All other books on a similar theme simply repeat this thought and contribute nothing to one's worldview. Take, for example, one of the basic thoughts of the Bible, namely that God must be bowed down to and his instructions carried out. This has given rise to a whole lot of books outlining the best way to do this. Some books say you should cross yourself with 2 fingers, others with 3. They tell how to build temples with the best-looking outward appearance. They cite hundreds of examples and acts of worship by various people, devotees of genuflection. They talk of wars and arguments over particular methods of worship. People get immersed in these arguments and lose their ability to discern the basic thought. They no longer use the basic thought as standard with which to compare to others. What happens is that in reading a whole lot of books about one and the same thing, they do not obtain any new information, but merely atrophy their analytical abilities. And they don't even bother trying to determine whether God really wants man to bow down to him, or whether he wants something quite different. As you can see, the hundreds of thousands of spiritual books that have appeared over the past 2,000 years all say pretty much one and the same thing. The appearance of a new, well-grounded thought about the interrelationship of God and man signals the appearance of a new, significant book for the first time in 2,000 years. With its appearance, its predecessor in the ranks of significant books passed into the ranks of historical documents. You're talking about the appearance of a new significant book. What's it called? Co-creation. It contains new thoughts, and it is well-grounded. The main thought of this book states in clear and well-grounded manner precisely what God wants of man and what man's purpose is. You wrote this book from Anastasia's words, and you will remember, Vladimir, God's response to the question from the elements of the universe. "What do you so fervently desire?" everyone inquired. And he, confident in his dream, replied, "Conjoint creation and joy for all from its contemplation." But where is the proof that this declaration actually represents God's will? The proof is everywhere. In the declaration itself, in the human heart and soul, in the logic of thinking. Judge for yourself. If you accept as a promise God's creation of the earth and man, when the feelings ensuing from that on the part of God will correspond with those of man, the parent of his children. All loving parents wish conjoint creation with their children. The second part of the declaration specifies what kind of creation God desires. And joy for all from its contemplation. So tell me, what kind of creations can bring joy to absolutely everybody? That's a hard question to answer. Some people get joy out of a good car, while others could care less about cars. Some like eating meat, while others don't eat meat at all. There's even a popular saying, there's no accounting for taste. It would be hard to find something that everybody could embrace. And yet, it is possible. Think about air, water, flowers, for example. But those have already been created while we're talking about conjoint creation. Yes, air, water, and vegetation have already been created, but they're not always the same. Man is capable of making his air filled with dust, smoke, and lethal gases, yet the same man can fill it with ethers, aromas, and flower pollen. Water can too vary. You can use chlorine-smelling water, for example, or you can drink genuine, refreshing water. And in among the great variety of plants, you can either manufacture bloody chaos or create living scenes of extraordinary beauty and grandeur, attractive and delightful to the eye. There's a statement about that in co-creation. If the book Co-Creation, as you say, is significant, then isn't it also supposed to transform the life of society or somehow influence it? Yes, that's a law. A new thought inevitably embodies itself in a new way of life for society. But then when will this come about? 2 years have gone by already since that book was published. To put it more accurately, not 2 years already, but just 2 years. In this relatively brief space of time, however, it has already co-created a great deal. You yourself were saying, weren't you, that many people are already attempting to build a new way of life for themselves. They're even creating national development programs. Yes, I did say that. There are indeed manifestations of this already. You see, it took 300 years to make Christianity noticeably felt. And here's a look at what has been accomplished in just 2 years. Anastasia's thoughts are materializing in a real way of life among many peoples. They are uniting their aspirations into a single creative impulse of universal co-creation. She launched a new way of thinking into space, and this is an event of colossal proportions. This means that the book in which these thoughts were set forth for the first time will be accorded a similar evaluation. I guess that means that I, too, will be one of the world's significant writers? You will not be one of, you will be the most significant, Vladimir. My granddaughter would not even think of secondary roles for her beloved. It's not working out quite that way. The popular newspaper, Argumenti and Facti, Arguments and Facts, published a book rating, putting the Book of Kin in second place overall in Russia. After a time, a great many people will become aware of the significance of the books you have written, and then a simple first place in the ratings won't seem like that much. A mere 6 years has passed since you wrote your first book. You were a nobody back then, but today you are more than just famous. I've heard that you have been awarded recognition in a people's academic and presented with a certificate. You're right. Only this recognition wasn't from a traditional academy, but a public one. Well, there you go, a public academy. Treasure this award. It's higher than the traditional variety. The people have spoken. The people who have realized the significance of your books. They're the ones who have decided that you are significant. It means they've actually understood Anastasia's thoughts and appreciated them. It's not just ordinary people who have been able to do this. It's people who will be able to go further and embody, understand, and materialize her thoughts. That's how it will be. Only don't give yourself airs. Hold out until the time comes without giving in to pride. I'll try my best. I'll read over Anastasia's sayings again. It goes without saying that I won't read crime novels or any kind of fiction. There's really nothing in the way of new thoughts in them, just light entertainment fluff. But I do have one question I'm unable to find an answer to. You can't really tell whether a book is significant or not until after you've read it. But there is a huge number of books out there. You walk into a library and the shelves are lined with tens of thousands of books. Many of them have pretentious titles, even the ones like Conversation with God or Truth Unveiled or All the Secrets of Life. In actual fact, however, you can read and still not come across any new thoughts. For every 10,000 there may be only one significant book, but then my chances of stumbling across it are 1 in 10,000 too. What to do? Well, I'm telling you, before starting to read anything, take a survey of how people live in various corners of the globe. Take note of situations that appeal to you in their lifestyle, and then read their book and ponder it. But what if I don't find anything appealing? All peoples have similar troubles. There are differences, sure, but in the main, take the environment, for example. There's nowhere in the world where it's not going downhill. Well then, if you don't find anything appealing, then give some thought on your own as to how to build a harmonious way of life. And when you come up with something, you'll write a book about it yourself. All by myself? Without reading anything else? You're contradicting yourself, Vladimir. You were the one who said that you can't find any books worth reading, and behind those outrageous titles there's only a proliferation of words without any sense, without any new thoughts. And at the same time you are doubting. You think that you can't be intelligent without reading a whole lot of rubbish. In any case, I can tell that every man, right from birth, aspires to read the most important book, one whose language is distinct from printed letters. You remember, the divine language has fragrance and color. I understand. So read and ponder what you've read. Chapter 24. An exercise for teleportation. You're right, Vladimir. Anastasia's grandfather continued. In terms of present state of consciousness of most people today, in what Anastasia creates can seem incredible. Still, once the conscious awareness and state of mind belonging to our forebears at the time of our pristine origins are fully comprehended, these same people will look back and laugh at the astonishment they are now expressing. I'll tell you now about just one exercise that will enhance your ability to easily teletransport your second self. That is, to transport yourself to a neighboring town or a different country or time period. Anybody can do this as long as they're not lazy about it. Remember one time you saw Anastasia, in a response to your request, move her body in a split second from one side of the lake to the other, and then move it back again. And she didn't hide the fact that any man is capable of doing the same. One must mentally visualize all the cells of the body, down to the tiniest ones which aren't even visible under a microscope, and disperse them into space with one's thought. and then gather them together by the power of thought in the new place. Just watching this can astonish the imagination. Anyone can do this whose speed of thinking allows them to visualize in a single moment all the details of their body. Even a microscopic error, though, is enough to prevent the cells from gathering together after dispersal. I've done this on just 3 occasions over my lifetime, and each time I prepared for it a year or more in advance. I can't do anything like that anymore. Either I'm just a bit past my prime, or I've got too lazy. But even my granddaughter, who was able to demonstrate her teleportation ability so easily, said that this should never be done unless there is an acute need for it, and she explained why. Still, she transported you on several occasions to different times and cities. You saw images, and you felt as though you were present at the events you witnessed, am I right? Yes, you are, I confirmed. And it was when I described how she transported herself and me to another planet without our bodies. Our bodies remained on the earth. A lot of people didn't believe such a thing was possible. They'll believe it when they're able to do something along those lines themselves. I'll teach you how. Just listen carefully and try to make sense of what I say. Man is made up of a multitude of energies which comprise his being. Feelings, thought, imagination, that's all man too. But these energies cannot be seen by the eye. We shan't say whether these parts of the body are material or not. In this case, the degree of their materiality isn't important. What is important is that they exist, and that these are also you, a man. The material human body is one of the many elements comprising a man. Man can live without a material body, only then he would have to be called something else. The material body affords a visible opportunity to define the degree of harmonious balance among all the other energies. Now imagine that you or some other man took all your energies by your own free will, separated them from your body, and transported them to a different space. Is that something anybody can do? They can. It happens to a certain degree with everyone when they sleep. But don't get carried away. Keep on listening. I said that man is capable of transporting, by his own free will, his whole complex of feelings to some other place. That requires just a bit of training. Here's a training exercise. First, you need to find a spot where you won't be disturbed. It can be just an ordinary room with a bed, as long as no distracting sounds can enter. So you lie down on the bed and relax your body. See to it that your arms, legs, and head are all lying freely in a comfortable position. Then, without moving, try to direct more of your body toward one hand, as opposed to the other parts of your body, purely by your will. If you don't succeed right off, try again until you feel a slight tingling in your fingertips on the hand you've been directing the blood and your energy toward. You should spend no more than 30 minutes a day on such attempts, but keep them up until you are able to freely direct the flow of energy and blood at will, first to one hand, then the other, then to your feet. Once you achieve the desired result, you should be able to direct energy to the brain as well. If you succeed at this, you will notice a significant benefit to your health. You'll be able, for example, to remove a pimple or sore from your arm or leg or any other part of your body. You'll be able to reverse hair loss. But most importantly, you'll be able to supply your brain with supplemental energy. I should also point out that in order to achieve such results, you should refrain from eating meat for several days before beginning the exercise. You should have a varied diet of fresh and easily digestible foods containing ethers. In your present living conditions, these are hard to come by, but here are some foodstuffs which can give you a lot of things you're missing. Take approximately 10 grams of cedar oil each morning, then about 20 grams of honey and 5 of flower pollen. You should repeat this 3 hours before bedtime. Once you have completed this first part of the exercise, then you can go on to the second. For this part, tell me, what are some of the most common actions people perform every day around their home? Probably food preparation is the most frequent. The majority of us, of course, prepare food every day. Peeling potatoes, for example. So choose an action which you repeat most often. Which specific action it is doesn't really matter. The main thing is that it is one that you are very familiar with. This may well be the most familiar for some people. Others can choose something else. Now take a watch and note the time as you begin this particular action. While you are carrying it out, try not to think about anything else. Remember all the details as well as what you feel while doing it. If you're peeling potatoes, for example, take note of how you hold the knife, where the scraps fall, how you wash them, and the sensation of water. Remember how you put the potatoes into the pot of boiling water and set it on the stove. Remember how you cleaned up the scraps when you were finished. When you decide that your actions are completed, look at the time and either remember or write down how many minutes you spent on them. Let's say it took 20 minutes altogether. Now set your alarm clock to go off in exactly 20 minutes. Go into the other room, the one where you mastered the first part of the exercise while lying on the bed. Lie down on the bed again, relax, close your eyes, and picture yourself in the room where you peeled the potatoes. It is essential to visualize everything down to the minutest detail. If you visualize everything correctly and consistently in all the details, the alarm should go off at exactly the moment that you have finished your visualization. If you're lazy and leave out a lot of the details, you'll finish your visualization before the alarm goes off. If, on the other hand, you're slow and lethargic in your thinking and visualization, the alarm will go off before you've finished. Some people will need a whole year's training to do this, others 2 years, while there are those who might learn it all in a month. Once you learn to make your visualizations coincide with real time, you're close to being ready for teleportation. You can then go on to the third part of the exercise. In part 3, you have to mentally enter another room of your home and carry out a series of actions which you do only rarely. First, measure the time it takes you to carry out the actions in visualization. Let's say you go into a room, fill a watering can with water, and proceed to water some flowers. After doing this and getting up from the bed, check your watch to see how many minutes the visualization took you, and either memorize the figure or write it down. Then go into the room you recently entered in your mind and repeat the action of watering the flowers. The time should coincide right to the minute. If it doesn't, well, that means you need more training. Once you've got the times to coincide, then you'll be able to do a great deal with your second self. You'll be able to visit not just other rooms in your home, but your neighbor's home too, and even other countries. For this, you will only need a few reliable details. After analyzing them, you'll be able to recreate the whole environment in detail and actually go there. Not everyone will manage to do something like this, but I can tell you with certainty that once you have been in an overseas city, you'll be able to go there again and again by transporting that second self of yours. Once you master this, though, you need to be mindful about one particular danger. You shouldn't detach your second self from your body for very long. At this point, I'll digress from Anastasia's grandfather's account and tell you more in detail about the danger involved. After doing this exercise for curiosity's sake and achieving the results he spoke of, I tried teleporting my second self to the island of Cyprus in the city of Paphos, which I had visited earlier. Lying on the sofa in my office, I relaxed and pictured myself getting ready for the trip, going to the airport, boarding the plane, landing at Larnaca, and checking into the hotel I had stayed at in Paphos. Then I took a shower and walked down to the seaside. Coffee in the evening, the local music, a morning stroll on the beach, bathing in the sea, it was all there. I returned, or woke up, I'm not sure which is the more accurate description here, 3 days later, and I could barely lift myself out of bed. My body, to put it mildly, had been wanting to go to the bathroom for a long time, and nobody had bothered to take it there. I was also very hungry, but nobody had fed it. I finally managed to get up and take a look at myself in the mirror. I wasn't happy with what I saw. A 3-day stubble had sprouted on my face, and my facial expression was peeved and joyless, and I felt very sorry for my poor body, which had been abandoned the past 3 days. The whole experience taught me a lesson, that man's body is nothing but an utterly helpless piece of flesh, without energy of the second. Or is it the first, human self? Yet, helpless as it might be, it still belonged to me, and I have no right to leave it unattended, even for the sake of a trip to some overseas resort. I also observe that when you travel without your body, though the sensation may appear complete, and your body feel the seawater and the warmth of the sun's rays, the body still doesn't get a tan. At first, I regretted the time wasted on the training, but later I managed to make profitable use of it in the ability to foresee, with the help of my second self, some events that hadn't happened yet. This is how I managed to write on several topics which I'm about to present to you now. Chapter 25. Give Children Their Motherland. In Ukraine, there is a city called Kharkov. In this city, there is an orphanage. A fine orphanage with cozy rooms, a handsome aquarium, and a large swimming pool. It has received significant support from local authorities and business community. In showing me the facilities, the head of the municipal education department remarked that the children from this orphanage go to the regular public school. As I looked at the window, I could see groups of children on their way back from school. Only one little girl was walking apart from the rest. That's Sonia. She's in grade 1, the director explained. She always walks alone. She thinks that she will soon be adopted by a Jewish family. Why a Jewish family? I asked. She doesn't at all look like a Jewish child. With her fair hair, she looks Ukrainian more than anything. Someone at school told her that Sonia is a Jewish name, so she must be Jewish. Sonia agreed and decided at once that she would definitely be adopted by a Jewish family. And she always walks alone, thinking that if she walks with the group, her future parents might not notice her. Kharkov has a fine orphanage. There are orphanages, too, in other cities in Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia. They are home to children, yet no matter how cozy the rooms are in these orphanages, all children dream of having parents and a family. In her nondescript shoes, small and slender, first-grader Sonia trod in a no-nonsense fashion across the asphalt courtyard, separately from her group of classmates, and Sonia, who lived in the orphanage, had a dream. A day went by, then another, then months. Sonia wasn't aware that children's shelters had been around a long time in various countries, and that not all children ended up being adopted. Most of them, in fact, are doomed to spend their whole lives parentless. Sonia wasn't adopted either. However, her life did not turn out in the usual way. At that time, a group of Kharkov residents decided to build a community not far from the city. They managed to acquire 150 hectares of land, and 120 families decided to set up their own kin's domain, a hectare each in size. One lot on the edge of the community remained unspoken for, so they decided to give it to somebody from the orphanage. It turned out that little Sonia was selected as the recipient. They brought the girl out to see her plot, accompanied by one of the house mothers. The house mother began to explain to Sonia. "Do you see, Sonia? The stakes driven into the ground and the rope stretched between them. This rope marks off your land, a whole hectare. It is a gift to you from the people who have also taken a hectare of land nearby to plant gardens and build houses on. When you grow up, you too will be able to build a house and plant a garden. Your land will be waiting for you." The little girl walked up to the rope, touched it, and asked the house mother, "Does that mean that on the other side of this rope is my land, and I can do whatever I want with it?" "Yes, Sonichka, this is your land, and you alone are in charge of everything that will grow on it." "And what will grow on it?" "Well, for the time being, as you can see, a lot of different kinds of grasses. But look over there on your neighbors' plots. They've already started planting apple trees and pear trees and a whole bunch of other fruit trees, and they'll soon have flourishing orchards. And when you grow up, you will decide what to plant on your land and where to put it, so that it will look beautiful just like the others." Sonia bent over and crawled under the rope into her hectare of land. She took several steps along the rope, carefully examining the ground and all the little creatures twittering and darting about on the grass. She walked as far as a little birch tree growing on the plot and touched its slender trunk. She turned to the house mother and in a somewhat excited voice asked, "What about this little tree?" The little birch tree. Is that mine too? Yes, Sonichka. As of now, the birch tree belongs only to you since it is growing on your land. When you get older, you'll be able to plant other trees here. But now it's time to go. It'll soon be lunchtime, and I have to get back to the group. The little girl turned to look at her plot and stood silently contemplating it. People who have children know that when they play, children often build little rooms for themselves out of various things, or in the country they set up little lean-tos for themselves to play in. For some reason, every child has a need to fence off a little world of their own from the big world outside, to create their own space. Children who live in orphanages have a common space, but this common space, even if it is very well appointed, can only have a negative effect on them. Like other orphanage children, Sonia never had a corner to call her own, even a tiny one. And here she was, standing on the other side of the rope where everything belonged exclusively to her, including the grass and the lively grasshoppers hopping around the ground and the little birch tree. The slim girl turned to her house mother and started to speak. Her voice combined tones of both pleading and decisiveness. I beg of you very, very much to please let me stay here. You go on ahead. I'll come back on my own. How will you get back? It's 30 kilometers. I'll make it, Sonia replied firmly. I'll walk and I'll make it. Maybe I'll take the bus. Please let me have some time on my land all by myself. The driver of Sigili, who happened to be the proprietor of the plot next door to Sonia's, overheard the conversation and proposed, Let the girl stay here until the evening. I'll take you back now and bring her home tonight. After a moment's thought, the house mother agreed. How could she refuse after seeing the face of this little girl standing behind the rope awaiting her decision? All right, Sonia. You may stay here until this evening. I'll send along lunch with the driver. What do you need to do that for? Responded Sigili driver. We'll be happy to share our lunch with our neighbor, he added, with a respectful emphasis on the word neighbor. Do you hear that, Klava? He called out to his wife, who was busy preparing lunch on the porch of their house. Their house was still under construction. Make dinner for 4. Our neighbor will be joining us today. Fine, answered his wife. There's enough for everyone. And she added, Just give us a shout, Sonia, if there's anything you need. Thank you, answered Sonia, now extremely happy. After the Zagili had departed, Sonia walked along the rope string between the stakes. She walked slowly, sometimes pausing to sit down on the grass and touch something with her hands before continuing on. In this fashion, she walked around the whole perimeter of her lot. Then she stood in the middle of her hectare and surveyed all sides of the perimeter. And then at once she threw her hands in the air and began running, jumping, and spinning around. After lunch, Klava noticed how tired the little girl looked after trotting around her plot and invited her to have a nap on the folding cot. But Sonia, tired as she was, replied, If possible, can you give me some old clothing I can spread out to lie down on? I'll take a nap on my own piece of land by the birch tree. Nikolai set up the cot with a small mattress and a blanket beside the birch tree on Sonia's plot. The girl lay down and immediately fell into a deep sleep. This was her first time sleeping in her own kin's domain. But now the orphanage was faced with what initially seemed an insoluble problem. Not a day passed but Sonia would ask the house mothers to allow her to go to her own hectare of land. Their explanations that she was still too young to take the bus all by herself, and the house mothers couldn't take her since they couldn't leave the other children, fell on deaf ears. Sonia began talking with the orphanage's director. She explained to him that she absolutely had to go see her land. She had to, because on the neighboring plots people were already planting trees and would soon have flourishing orchards, while her land would be left abandoned. Nothing would be flourishing on it. Finally, the orphanage's director came up with a solution that was acceptable to Sonia. He told her, Right now, Sonia, it is not possible to take you out to your plot, since apart from everything else, you still have a fortnight's study ahead of you. 2 weeks from now, the summer holiday will begin. I'll have a word with the neighbors next door to your plot, and if they agree to watch out for you, then during the holidays we'll send you off to your plot for a time, for a week at least, or maybe longer. By the way, you could spend this coming fortnight, getting yourself ready for your land. Here, take these 2 brochures and read up. One of them tells how to make planting beds, and the other is a guide to medicinal herbs. If you can be on your best behavior these next 2 weeks, I'll also get ready for you a selection of seeds for the holidays." Sonia was on her best behavior. She did all her lessons conscientiously and devoted absolutely all her spare time to reading the 2 brochures the director had given her. When she lay down to sleep, she dreamt about the beautiful plants that would grow on her plot. On one occasion, while all the other children were fast asleep, the night nurse noticed Sonia drawing sketches of trees and flowers by the moonlight streaming through her window. The neighbors did agree to watch out for the little girl, and when the summer holidays began, the director himself helped load a number of items into the baggage compartment of the Ziguli, including boxed lunches for 2 weeks, a small shovel and rake, as well as a packet of seeds. Nikolai didn't want to take the boxed lunches from the orphanage, but the director assured him that Sonia was an extremely independent girl and would never want to be burdened to anyone, so it would be better for her to see she had her own supply of food. And they also gave her a new sleeping bag, in spite of the fact that Nikolai's family had already fixed up a little room for Sonia on the finished ground floor of their house, complete with sheets and pillows. As Sonia was getting into the car, a whole lot of people came to see her off. Not just the orphanage's staff on duty that day, but a crowd who had come especially to look upon the little girl's face, which was beaming with happiness. For the first 3 nights, Sonia slept in the room of the neighbors had fixed for her, spending all day long on her own hectare of land, which was so dear to her heart. The 3rd day was Nikolai's birthday, and a lot of guests came. One young couple arrived with their tent. On the following day, when the guests departed, the tent was left behind. "That's a present for you," the young couple said to Nikolai. Then Sonia asked Nikolai if she could sleep in the tent. Nikolai gave her his permission. "Of course, go ahead if you like." "What is it? Do you find your room stuffy?" "The room is fine," replied the girl, "but everybody here spends the night on their own land, while my land is all alone at night. There are lights burning on many of the other plots at night time, but mine's all dark." "So does that mean you'd like me to set up the tent on your plot?" "I'd like that very, very much, Uncle Kolya. If you could, set it up beside the birch tree. Only if you have time, and if it's not too inconvenient." Every night after that, Sonia slept in the tent Nikolai set up on her plot beside the birch tree. Upon awakening early in the morning, she would go at once to the bucket of water standing by the tent and draw some water in a mug. After filling her mouth, she would let a thin stream of water splash into the palms of her hands to wash her face. Then she would take out a sketchbook in which she had made hand drawings of the plan for her plot and study them. After that, she would proceed to dig her flower and vegetable beds. The small sapper's spade the director had given her had a sharp edge, but Sonia was unable to get the full blade into the ground. She could only get it halfway, but she still managed to make her vegetable beds. Her neighbor, Nikolai, offered to plow up any designated areas with a rototiller, but Sonia categorically refused. She was fiercely jealous of any encroachment on her territory. People sensed this and endeavored not to cross over the line marked out by the stakes and the rope without her knowledge. Even Nikolai, upon waking in the morning, when he went to call Sonia to breakfast, would go only as far as the property line and call out to Sonia from there. Perhaps it was some kind of extraordinary streak of aspiration toward independence on this young girl's part, or else the fear of becoming a burden to someone that prevented her from asking anybody any favors. Even when one of the community residents tried to offer her clothing or candy or some sort of equipment, she would politely thank them but categorically decline the offer. In the 2 weeks she spent on her land, Sonia managed to dig out and plant 3 vegetable beds with a huge flower bed in the middle. On the morning of her last day of her fortnight's stay, Nikolai went to the perimeter of her plot as usual to call her for breakfast. The girl was standing by her flower bed, in which nothing had come up yet. As she stared at it, she replied to Nikolai without turning around, "Uncle Kolya, you don't have to call me to eat this morning. I don't feel hungry." Nikolai would later say that he could hear her voice cracking. He could tell she was barely holding back her tears. He wasn't about to try to find out what the matter was. He went back to his place and began observing Sonia through his field glasses. The girl was pacing back and forth across her plot, first touching a plant with her hands, or straightening out something in one of the beds. Then she went over to her birch tree and put her arms around it. Nikolai could see her shoulders trembling. By lunchtime, the orphanage's aging minivan arrived. The driver stopped at the entrance to Nikolai's territory and sounded his horn. Nikolai would recount the subsequent events as follows. When I saw her through my field glasses gather up her simple little things like the shovel and rake and head over our direction with such a sad expression on her face. When I looked at that face close up, I couldn't hold out any longer. I grabbed my mobile phone and rang the orphanage. Fortunately, I was able to get through to the director right away. I told him I was willing to sign any papers required, accepting responsibility for the child, saying I would take the summer off work to spend the whole time here on the plot, just so the little girl could stay on her piece of land until the end of the holidays. At first, the director started to explain that all the children from the orphanage were to go to summer camp at the seaside for rest and therapy, that he and his colleagues had spent a long time securing this opportunity, and that now they would be going to the camp thanks to the generosity of a group of sponsors. I then spoke with the director frankly, man to man, but he wasn't offended and gave me an equally frank response, whereupon he asked to have a word with the driver, promising to come out himself tomorrow. I ran out to the road and handed the telephone to the driver, adding from myself, "Okay there, friend, get out of here pronto." The driver laughed. Then Sonia came up to me and said, "Uncle Kolya, didn't the van driver come for me? But why did he leave?" For some reason, my negotiations with the orphanage's director had left me rather tense. I lit a cigarette, my hands were trembling, and I responded to her. "What makes you think he was coming for you? He simply came to see if you needed any food supplies or anything else." I told him everything was okay. She looked me straight in the eye. It seemed as though she understood what was going on. Then she said softly, "Thank you, Uncle Kolya." Then she began walking and eventually running back to her land. The orphanage's director came the following morning. I was already waiting for him, only he didn't head my way, but walked straight over in the direction of Sonia's tent. I didn't get a chance to warn him not to cross the line without invitation, but, smart fellow that he was, he guessed as much himself. Again, in an apparent effort not to traumatize the child, this clever chap had the sense to say as the little girl came to meet him, "Good day, Sonia. I just stopped by to let you know we're all going off to the seaside. Would you like to stay here or join us on our trip?" "Stay here!" Sonia didn't just say it, but screamed it. "I thought as much," responded the director. "So I brought you something by way of boxed lunches." "No need to trouble yourself. No need to waste your time. I don't need anything." "No need? Then what would you have me do? The state provides us with funds for each child in our care. But you are here taking care of yourself and feeding yourself. Tell me, how can I account for the state funds in a situation like this? No, please be so gracious as to accept these. Okay, Alexis, you can go and unload them." "Will you allow us to come in, Sonia? Maybe you'll show us your place here?" Sonia stared at the director for several moments, sizing up the whole situation. Then she noticed the driver of the minivan unloading some heavy-looking bags, and once she finally realized that she would be staying put here on her land for the whole summer holidays, she joyfully exclaimed, "Oh, what have I? Come in, come in. The gate's over there, where there's no rope. Please be my guests. I'll be happy to show you my place." "You too, Uncle Kolya. Come on in." She led us over to her tent and at once invited us to take a drink of water from the bucket standing alongside. "Here, have some water. I get it from a spring. It's good tasting, better than tap water. Please do take a drink." "I shan't say no to that," replied the director, drawing half a mug full of water from the bucket and downing it with gusto. "It's jolly good." The driver and I both took a drink and complimented Sonia on her water. To her great delight, it was probably the first time in her life that Sonia had possessed anything of her own. Even if it was just water, it was still something that was hers, something of her own that she could offer to adults. Sonia began to feel like a real participant in the world. After that, we sat here listening for maybe an hour and a half or 2 hours while Sonia regaled us with her report of what she had already planted and what she was going to plant. and she showed us her drawings of her future kin's domain. Only there was no house in the plan she had drawn. "It's time for us to go," the director told Sonia. "You can unpack your things on your own." I threw in a battery-operated flashlight. It's an electric torch that can shine far into the distance, but if you switch it over to the daylight lamp setting, you can use it to read by. And now you'll have something to read. I brought you some magazines on landscape design and gardening books and books on folk medicine. "Oh, I forgot something again," spluttered Sonia. "Just a moment." She pulled back one of the tent flaps, and we saw a bunch of various herbs hanging on a tent wire stretched taut. She took out several bunches, and offered them to the director. "This is celandine, a special kind of herb. This is for Katya in our group. She needs to make a brew with it and drink it. She's so often ill. I read up on celandine in the brochure you gave me. I've tried it already." "Thank you." "In sum, this director is a pretty fine fellow, and he loves children. I had a talk with him later. He asked me how Sonia was behaving herself, and gave me some concrete advice. Sonia spent the whole summer in her tent on her own piece of land. The bed at the center of her garden blossomed with magnificent flowers, while the produce from the vegetable beds included onions and radishes. In the evenings, when the days began to grow shorter, you could often see the lights of the electric torches flickering in the tent. Every evening, Sonia read books on folk medicine and made drawings of her future plans for her land in her sketchbook. When the orphanage's minivan came to collect her at the end of the summer, I helped Sonia load up her things, and there was quite a bit to load. Just the bunches of herbs she had dried numbered around 200. Her yield also included a sack of potatoes and 3 pumpkins. The van had a full load. I asked Sonia, "What about next year? Shall I hold on to your tent for you?" "I'll definitely come again next summer. First day of the holidays, I'll be here. You're a good neighbor, Uncle Kolya. Thank you for being such a good neighbor." And she shook my hand just like an adult, and this time she had a much stronger handshake. Sonia had not only got herself a good tan, but she had got stronger and more self-confident as well. When she came the next year, she brought fruit tree saplings along with her, as well as some kind of seedlings, and got down to business right off. At a community meeting, people from our settlement decided to build Sonia a little house, but Zina, whose husband was an entrepreneur and had built the biggest mansion on the community, began to insist that Sonia's house should be more than little. I'm ashamed to look visitors in the eye. The foundations of all those houses in the settlements are being set up as though they were palaces. And here's one only child living in a tent. What can visitors think? Knowing the girl's feelings, especially her resentment at any kind of offers of assistance, they entrusted me to negotiate with her. I went to see her and said, "Sonia, at a community meeting, all the residents have decided to build you a little house to live in. All you have to do is show us where you would like it placed." In response, she asked me rather guardedly, "Uncle Kolya, how much would a little house cost?" Not suspecting anything, I replied, "Oh, somewhere in the neighborhood of 200,000 rubles. In other words, about 2,000 per family." 2,000 each? But that's a lot of money. That means people would have to buy less of something for their own children, just to spend on me. "Uncle Kolya, I beg of you, tell the people I don't need a house right now. I haven't even thought of the place to put it yet. I beg of you, Uncle Kolya, please explain to them." And she was greatly concerned, and I could understand why. Upon receiving her piece of land, Sonia felt independent for the first time in her life. Her plot of land substituted for her parents. It needed her, and she needed it. By some kind of internal instinct, the girl felt or imagined that her land didn't want any outsiders laying their hands on it. And God forbid anyone might criticize her after the house was completed, even tacitly. Her own sense of independence was far dearer to her than having her own house. I tried to persuade the residents not to force any gifts on the girl, but then something completely unexpected happened. A group of kids on their way back from the lake ran past Sonia's plot. Out in front, a fine-looking bicycle, was the entrepreneur's son, Edik. He was always teasing Sonia, calling her Malyavka, even though he himself was only 3 years her senior. "Hey there, Malavka," Edith called out to Sonia. "You spend your whole time landscaping. Aren't you bored with that already? Why don't you come with us to see the fireworks?" "What fireworks?" asked Sonia. "My papa's going to burn down the construction trailer his workers have been using. Come and you'll see. We've already got a fire engine there on standby." "Why burn it down?" "Because it's spoiling the view." "But after it burns down, nothing will grow on the spot for a long time." "Why not?" "'Cause all the helpful worms and all the bugs, they'll get burnt up too. I tried lighting a fire by myself one time, and see, nothing's ever grown on that spot since." "Wow, Malyavka, you're really observant. So come and save our worms. Take the old trailer away. Otherwise, Papa won't know how else to get rid of it." "How am I going to take it away? Isn't it heavy?" "What do you mean, how? With a crane, of course. The crane's coming the day after tomorrow to set up our windmill. So either you take it or we're going to have a big bonfire." "Okay, Erik, I'll agree to take your trailer." "Then let's go." A crowd of adult neighbors along with a whole lot of children had gathered at Edith's parents' estate. A fire crew was standing by at the ready. Edith approached his father, who was already on his way over to the construction trailer carrying a can of gasoline. To the disappointment of the younger crowd and the glad astonishment of the adults, he told his father, "Papa, you don't need to burn the trailer." "What do you mean, I don't need to? How come?" "'Cause I've given it away." "To whom?" "To the Malyavka." "What Malyavka?" "To Sonia, from the plot on the far side of the settlement." "Well, did she agree? Did she agree to accept it from you?" "Hey, Papa, if you don't believe me, ask her yourself." Sonia was standing in the crowd of youngsters. Edith took her by the hand and brought her over to his father. "Tell him, Sonia, that you agreed to take his shack off his hands. Tell him." "I agree," Sonia answered quietly. Oh, how the entrepreneur just bubbled up with pride at his son's accomplishment. Quite a coup. Here was this girl who never took anything from anyone, and now the capricious Sonia had decided to accept a gift from his Edith. As soon as the children had left, the entrepreneur summoned the whole construction brigade that had been putting the finishing touches on his mansion and said to the foreman, "So now, lads, take any materials you need and start working around the clock. I'll pay you double time if you can only refit the trailer's interior to modern European living standards in 48 hours. You can leave the exterior shabby, the way it is, but the interior?" 48 hours later, next to the birch tree where the tent had been standing on Sonia's plot, the construction trailer with its shabby exterior was set up on brand new brick foundation. The exterior was indeed shabby, but the builders had primed it for painting and left tins of finished paint and brushes inside. Sonia later painted the exterior herself. She now had, for the first time in her life, her very own little house standing on her own dear piece of land. By the following year, this little house had been transformed into a little fairy tale chateau, covered with ivy and wild grapevines and surrounded by flower beds. 10 years went by. Sonia finished school and had already spent a whole year living in her domain. Mansions could be seen throughout the community, which was already dripping in lush green vegetation and flourishing orchards. But the best and prettiest estate belonged to Sonia. While her classmates were leaving the orphanage and going off to parts unknown, trying to get accepted into any kind of academic institution just to get a roof over their heads, or to find any kind of work so they could at least feed themselves, Sonia was already a wealthy woman. The residents of the community would give their surplus fruits and vegetables to a manager. Products grown on domains fetched a higher than average price. They were exported to countries in the European Union, where they were sold in stores specializing in eco-friendly produce. Sonia gave what she grew in her plot to the manager as well. Though most of what she produced was bought by visitors from the city who had heard about this extraordinary girl and her fabulous domain, Sonia had also been gathering medicinal herbs and had helped save a great many people from disease. One day, when Edith came back for a visit to his parents, who were now living full-time in their domain, for the past 3 years he had been studying at a prestigious university in America. He was about to undergo a serious medical operation. He was suffering from liver and kidney disorders, probably caused by the poor quality of food and water abroad. Before the operation, Edith decided to spend a week visiting his parents. His mother, Zinaida, made a suggestion. Maybe, son, we should pay a visit to our local healer, just in case she can help. Now there, Mama, what century are we living in, eh? Medicine in the West has been highly developed for quite a while now. They just cut out and replace whatever they need to. Don't worry, I'm not going to see any witch doctors. That's ancient. I'm not suggesting that you go to any witch doctors. Let's go see... You remember that little girl from the orphanage on the far side of our settlement who surprised everyone by fixing up the little piece of land they gave her all on her own? Oh, you mean that Malyavka? I vaguely remember her. Well, now she's no longer a Malyavka son, but a very respected woman. Managers are willing to pay double the price for anything grown by her hand, and people come from faraway places for her blend of medicinal herbs, even though she doesn't advertise it at all. How did our Malyavka get to be such an expert? Well, she's been spending every summer since grade 1 on her plot, and every day during the winter she's been reading books on gardening and folk medicine. The child's mind is sharp, and she picks up everything so quickly. She's got a lot of it from books. Only people say her real understanding came more from herself. They say, too, that that the plants understand her. She talks with them. Well, that's our Malyavka for you. How much does she charge for treatment? Sometimes she charges, but she's also been known to offer help for free. One day, last autumn, I happened to meet her by the pond. She looked me in the eye and told me, Anastasia, the whites of your eyes don't look too good. Here, take this herb, make a tea with it, and drink it, and it'll get better. And it did. And there was really something wrong with my eyes, since I had a liver complaint. Now that's gone, too. So go on. Let's go, son. We'll go and see her. Maybe she can help your liver, too. It's not just my liver, Mama. They've already made their diagnosis, and they're going to remove one of my kidneys, and no tea is going to help that. Anyway, let's go pay her a visit. It'll be interesting to see Malyavka's domain. They say it's like a paradise there. Yes, indeed, she has done a fantastic job, exclaimed Edik, as he and his mother approached Sonia's domain. Most people in the community seem to have put all their efforts into building mansions with stone fences, whereas she's created a real paradise. Just look, Mama, the fence she's created from greenery. You would have held some of that exclamation in reserve if you knew what her garden looked like, observed Zinaida. Only very few people get to see it. She opened the gate a little and called out loudly, Sonia, if you're home, come on out. Sonia, are you home? The door of the little house, the former construction trailer, opened wide, and out onto the porch stepped a young woman. With a deft movement of her hand, she tossed her tightly woven braid of chestnut-colored hair over her shoulders. When she caught sight of Zinaida accompanied by her son, her cheeks flushed with a rosy glow. She fastened the top button on her cardigan, which fit snugly over her supple breasts. And with a soft and light but gracious step, this young and beautiful girl made her way down the porch steps along the path to the gate where Zinaida and Edik were standing. Hello, Anastasia. Welcome back, Edward. If you'd like, come into my house or into my garden. Thank you for the invitation. We accept with pleasure, replied Zinaida. But Edik didn't say a word, and didn't even return Sonia's greeting. You know, Sonia, Zinaida went on as they headed for the garden, my son has a problem. He's about to have an operation. Even though it'll take place in America, it's still pretty upsetting to me as a mother. Sonia stopped, turned around, and asked Edik, What's the trouble with you, Edik? Edward. My heart, Edik replied, gasping in his throat. What do you mean, your heart? Exclaimed Zinaida. You told me it was your liver and your kidneys. Does that mean you were lying so I wouldn't get overly concerned? I wasn't lying, but now, Mama, my heart is beating so fast. Can't you feel it right here? He took his mother's hand and placed it against his chest. Listen, it's going to rupture and explode if you don't convince this beautiful maiden to marry me at once. You're such a jokester, laughed Zinaida. You practically scared me to death. I'm not joking, Mama. Well, if you aren't joking, Zinaida gaily continued, you ought to know that half the community have already sent matchmakers over on behalf of their sons, but to no avail. Sonia doesn't want to get married. You can ask her yourself why she doesn't want to, but don't set your poor mother up for a fall. Edith went up to Sonia and quietly inquired, Sonia, why have you never married anyone? Because, Sonia softly responded, I've been waiting for you, Edith. Oh, you teasers. What are you making fun of a mother like that for? Bless us, Mama, right now I'm not teasing, Edith declared firmly and took Sonia by the hand. And I'm not teasing either, Auntie Sina, Sonia said in a serious tone. You aren't teasing? That means you too, Sonia? You're not joking? Well, if you're not joking, then what are you still calling me Auntie for instead of Mama? Fine, I'll call you Mama, replied Sonia, her voice trembling. She took a step in Sinaida's direction, but then paused in hesitation. Sinaida couldn't immediately catch on to what was happening. Was this some kind of stalemate, a joke? She anxiously glanced back and forth between Sonia's face and her son's. Then there came the moment when she realized how serious the young couple's intentions really were. And at this point she rushed over to Sonia, embraced her, and broke into tears. Sonia, Sonechka, daughter, I know you're serious about each other. Sonia's shoulders were trembling too. She hugged Sinaida and repeated, Yes, Mama, we're serious, very serious indeed. Whereupon the young couple, holding hands, slowly and without eyes for anyone but each other, walked to the community streets, to the domain belonging to Edic's family. Sinaida walked out in front. She was laughing and crying at the same time, and chatted on incessantly, accosting each person they met. We've just come, and they've fallen in love with each other, and I bless them. At first I thought they were joking, but they fell in love right off. And I told them, and they said they wanted to get married, Mama, today. Good people, how is that possible? There's preparations to be made. It all has to be done officially. That's just not possible. Presently they saw Edic's father, the entrepreneur, coming out of the house to greet them. Upon hearing this, they came, more or less disconnected account from his wife's lips. He looked at the young couple and said, Well, now you're chattering on as usual, Sinaida. And what do you mean a wedding today is impossible? Just look at these young'uns. We have to hold the wedding not just today, but right now. Edic went up to his father and embraced him. Thank you, Papa. What are you thanking me for? Let's not waste time hugging each other. Everybody say, Gorko, 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 all the people cried out that had gathered round. Edic and Sonia kissed each other for the first time in front of the residents of the community. Everyone who happened to be home at the time assembled for the wedding. An improvised table was set up in the fresh air, and they all helped set it together. The ceremony didn't just buzz the way things did at traditional Russian parties. It sang well into the night. Despite the parents' pleadings, the young couple decided to settle down not in Edic's parents' mansion, which was actually more like a palace, but in Sonia's little house. You see, Father, Edic explained, this palace we've built with all its different wings takes up practically half a hectare. But we don't have the beauty that Sonia's domain has, or even the air. We've got to take half the additions down. The entrepreneur started drinking and kept at it for a whole week. But after that, to everyone's surprise, he started taking down the wings he had added to his mansion. He explained, We were pretty silly putting up all the additions. Our grandchildren won't want to move into catacombs like these. And Sonia and Edic went on living happily. Stop. Now, I've already started talking about the future, and most certainly it will be marvelous. But what about the present? At the present time, there is indeed a fine orphanage in the city of Kharkov, and there's a little girl named Sonia there. Sonia's in grade 3 now, but she doesn't have a hectare of land of her own. Neither do Tanya, Seryokva, or Katya, or any of the thousands of children living in orphanages. The Ukrainian Rada has not even put into the question on its agenda yet, the question of granting a hectare of land to every resident of the country, including orphans, for lifetime use, on which to set up a family domain. Neither has the Belarus Duma or the Russian Duma considered it. Will the children forgive them? Will today's parliamentary deputies be able to forgive themselves?